Hey everybody, this is Diana Keuilian with RealHealthyRecipes.com and welcome to the RHR Kitchen. And today I wanted to run you through one of my favorite recipes for the season, and that is for pumpkin pancakes. Now, you go to the store this time of year and there is pumpkin everything. There's tons of processed ingredients, processed pumpkin cookies, or boxed pumpkin pancakes, and most of these items are not really made with pumpkin. It's made with sugar, it's made with grains, it's very processed, and it's fun, and it's seasonal, and so we buy it. But what I wanted to do today is to show you how possible it is to make a seasonal, fun pumpkin pancake using these wholesome ingredients. You can use canned pumpkin, and this is something you can get the organic kind. They have plenty of options at the store, and it does save some time, but I think it's fun, and I really like to start with an actual pumpkin. And you don't have to go to the store and buy one of those giant pumpkins, the ones that you turn into jack-o'-lanterns. I actually use these little mini guys. And I don't know about you, but I used to think that these were just for decoration. And they are fun to use for decorations. As you can see, I like to decorate. But this is the perfect size to bake and use in a batch of this batter. So what we're going to do, I already cut it in half because I have a fear of cutting my fingers off on camera. I'll let you in on that. So you cut it in half, and then we're going to scoop out the seeds. Now, pumpkin seeds make such a good snack. You can roast them, you can flavor them with different spices. I have about 3 or 4 different recipes on my site for roasted pumpkin seeds. So I'm going to put these in a little bowl here, and I'm going to save them so that I can roast them, and I can take them to my son's flag football game tomorrow. And I'm going to be snacking on these while I watch him play. So we are scraping out the insides of our cute little pumpkin. And this is actually a recipe that you can use to just bake and eat the pumpkin as a snack or as a dessert. So I'll just put a little bit of coconut oil. So I have some coconut oil melted here. Rub a little bit of that inside of the pumpkin. And then I like to do just a little bit of cinnamon inside there and a little bit of coconut sugar. So this all just adds a little bit of flavor, and then I always add sea salt. I add sea salt almost to everything that I make because it enhances the flavors. So we've got some seasoning in there, a little bit of oil, and then I like to put the lid right back on and put it into a baking pan. And then what you're going to do is just add some water right there, just about an inch of water. And then we're going to bake this in the oven at 350 to 400, and you're going to watch it. Typically, it's going to take at least 40 to 45 minutes for it to get really soft, and you're going to be able to tell just by poking on it. So we want that flesh to be nice and tender so that we can then use it in our batter. And so this is our baked pumpkin. So you can see I let it get a little black on the top just to ensure that the inside, you can see it's still warm, that the inside is nice and tender. And you can see how I had seasoned it with that cinnamon and a little bit of the coconut sugar and some salt. So it's really tasty as it is. And what we're going to do now is scrape it out into the bowl to start our pancake batter. Now, like I said, you can definitely use the canned pumpkin, and you can see this is what the color is a little bit different. And I actually read an article that when you buy canned pumpkin, it's not all pumpkin. I guess the regulations as to what can be considered pumpkin are pretty broad. So most of the time it's a blend of different squashes and pumpkin. So if you really want that like pure pumpkin flavor, then by roasting your own pumpkin, you can be sure that you are getting the best pumpkin flavor. So you can see that I roasted this for long enough to where it is so tender. It's just falling out of the skin. And I'm not even going to need to use a food processor. We can just literally mash it up with a spoon. And a recipe that I actually like to do is to do a savory take on this. So I'll bake the pumpkins this same way, but instead of adding coconut sugar and cinnamon, I'll do a little bit of coconut oil, and then I'll do some ground cumin. and I'll bake it the same way, open it up, and then serve chili inside of it. And that's just kind of a fun way to serve up dinner and to enjoy pumpkin in a, in a savory way as opposed to a sweet way. Okay, now our recipe calls for 1.5 cups of baked pumpkin. So if you're using it from a can, use exactly 1.5 cups. If you're just making your own pumpkin, we don't have to get too technical about how much it is. The insides of one of these small pumpkins is perfect. If you really want to do a lot of pumpkin, you can do a couple of them. So you can see I got a little piece of the pumpkin skin, so you got to watch for that. So when we're using real food ingredients, we have extra fiber that will randomly be added, and that's so good for us. I mean, if you just look at the fibers here, this is real pumpkin versus the canned, you can see that the fiber content is way less. It's completely smooth. We don't have those natural fibers. So, this was so tender, we're just going to use a fork here and mash it up. And it's worth noting that I turned my griddle on before I even started this video. I think it's something that a lot of people overlook, is that, we don't just have to preheat the oven. We always need to preheat your skillet or preheat your griddle when you're going to be cooking on it, just to make sure that it cooks nicely and golden, and that we're not sitting here waiting for it to heat up with the batter on there. Okay, so we have our pumpkin in there, and now we are going to add 8 large eggs. Now this recipe for pumpkin waffles, this is grain-free, and it's going to be high in protein because we're using some nut flours, and we're using a good amount of eggs here, along with our other real food ingredients. So when you really look at the nutritional breakdown of this pancake versus, a pumpkin pancake that comes from one of those boxes that you'll see at the store this time of year, we're making something that's high in fiber, it's high in protein, and it's got some healthy fats in it. We're going to add some coconut oil. Okay, so we have 8 eggs, and we have 1 small pumpkin in here, or 1.5 cups if you're using from a can. And we mix that up really nicely. Now we're going to use a whole can of coconut milk. And this is my favorite brand, this Thai Kitchen. I love it for a few reasons, but it's always consistent, and I'm always able to separate the cream from the liquid. A lot of my recipes, I'll use the coconut cream separately. In this one, we're using the whole can, so we don't have to worry about the separation. We're going to mix that in. And the next wet item that we're going to add is 6 tablespoons of melted coconut oil. That coconut oil is actually going to help me to get these lumps out. So this is 6 tablespoons of melted coconut oil. And maybe you're thinking, when I buy coconut oil, it's solid. It's not liquid. It's really simple to melt the coconut oil. You can stick the entire jar of it, assuming it's a glass jar, into a skillet and put it over medium to low heat with a little bit of water, and just watch it, and it'll melt down by itself. It'll be nice and usable. Coconut oil, it's a great ingredient to use, and it's important to realize that it's temperature sensitive. So if you want it to be hardened, if you're going to make like a glaze or a frosting where you want it to have a good consistency, stick it in the fridge. It hardens up a little bit. If you need it to be liquid, like in this recipe, stick it in a skillet, melt it down a little bit. So it's a really versatile ingredient that I use a lot. Okay, so this is all of our wet ingredients. So now we're going to mix up our dry ingredients. And as I mentioned, we're using grain-free flours. So if you're not accustomed to working with grain-free flours, it's very simple. It's just a matter of getting the proportions right, because the flours will absorb different amounts of liquid. So I've figured out the equation for you, and we're using 2 cups of blanched almond flour. Now you could just as easily use almond meal, which is darker than this. It's almonds that have the skin still on it that are ground up. These are blanched almonds, so the skin's taken off. It looks more like traditional flour, so it has a little prettier look to it. And we are going to add in 2 tablespoons of coconut flour. And coconut flour is the tricky one that absorbs a lot of liquid. So anytime that you're using coconut flour, don't ever just swap it out for another flour one for one, because you will be left with a very dry product. So we need to be careful, and we typically don't use very much coconut flour, but it is nice and light. It's lighter than almond flour, so I always like to do a little balance of the two. And now we have 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So we're going to throw that in there, mix it in. And now the fun part is the spices. And you know, holiday baking is all about the spices. There's cinnamon, there's cloves and ginger, oftentimes nutmeg. And so really, I mean, there's apple pie spice blend that you can get. I think there's pumpkin pie spice blend. So really with the spices, I mean, be creative and use what you want, and use as much of it as you want. I'm using 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger, and then a 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. So that's my little spice blend. But like I said, you know, if you buy the pumpkin spice blend, you can save yourself time and just throw in a few teaspoons of that. But it's really just about getting those holiday flavors that you love incorporated into your batter. So we're going to mix all of this together. And that is all of our ingredients here. And I will be posting a link to this so that you can see it all in one spot. And now we have all of our dry ingredients and our wet ones. We're going to combine them together. Typically at this point, whenever I make a grain-free batter for especially waffles, but also for pancakes, I like to let it sit for a little bit. I'm not going to do that today because I know that we all have things to do, and I want to show you the end product. So we're going to mix it well. But when you're making this at home, you know, plan to make your batter with 10 or 15 minutes where you can just let it sit and you can let it just kind of bind together. The coconut flour is really the binder, in addition to all these eggs in this recipe. And then lots of my recipes will use arrowroot starch. And arrowroot starch is a binder as well. But these ingredients need a little bit of time to just kind of do their binding magic and incorporate with the liquids in the recipe. So we are going to make sure that we incorporate this really well. And I'm actually going to use a whisk here to really get some of the lumps out. Now, using real food ingredients like this whole pumpkin, it's not going to be a perfectly smooth batter, and that's okay. That's where the fiber comes into play. That's where you get these amazing flavors, and you know, it's not going to look perfect. It's not going to look cookie cutter or, you know, like the processed ingredients that we see, the processed products. You know, we get a package of pumpkin cookies at the store, and each one of them is the same shape and the same color, and they all look perfect. But you know, when we use real ingredients, real food, that's not the way it's going to turn out. And there's beauty and there's, you know, deliciousness involved with this real stuff. All right, so I've mixed this really well, and we are going. And I realized that I forgot to add the coconut sugar. So we're going to add in coconut sugar here at the end. And, you know, anytime you're going to add some wholesome sugar to a recipe like this, use as much or as little as you'd like. And oftentimes I will actually use stevia. So it just kind of depends. If you're really watching your sugars, you know, there's sweetness in that whole pumpkin. So we don't have to add a ton of this. I do have written here for the recipe, I have 1/3 cup. And this is a wholesome sugar, it's coconut palm sugar, and so the glycemic index is already a lot lower than refined sugar. But you know, when I'm making this for the family, for the kids, I definitely use some of this. If I was going to make it for myself, I would sub out a little bit of stevia. But again, this is something you can just determine, you know, your own dietary goals and your taste preference, because you know, some of us love it sweet and some of us, you know, could go with something that's not as sweet. So now we've got our sugar in here. We've got all of our ingredients. I'm going to double check to make sure I didn't leave anything else out. We're going to add a little sprinkle of salt because salt is always good. Got that nice pink Himalayan salt. Got to get the salt that has the nutrients in there. And now we are going to grease our pancake griddle, which has already been on for a good 20 minutes. So I'm going to reduce the heat a bit. I'll typically turn it to just below medium while it heats up, and then I'll reduce it down to low when I'm going to cook the actual batter. And so I have coconut oil here, so I'm just rubbing some coconut oil on before we put our batter on. And like I said, this batter works beautifully as waffles as well. So if you love waffles and you love pumpkin waffles, go ahead and use this to make waffles. But I think pancakes are a little bit quicker, and I can do more of them at once. So we're doing pancakes. This is also a great recipe to make a whole bunch of it and then keep them in the freezer. I mean, they'll last a few days in the fridge, but when you stick them in the freezer, you can have them ready to go in the mornings. My kids are always hungry in the morning, and I never have much time, so I love having stuff like this that I can grab out of the freezer and then just stick in the toaster oven and have it for them before they go to school. Now you can see that there's some small bubbles that are coming up on the batter here. We definitely need to wait until there's a good amount of the bubbles that have appeared, and this is just indicating how much is being cooked on the bottom. So, if you go in there and you try to flip it before it's completely ready, then it's going to fall apart. And so, part of the equation is getting your griddle nice and preheated, which we did. So that was step one. And now step two is having some patience and waiting for the batter to cook enough to where it's going to be stable to turn it. And then the third step, which I did skip, is to let your batter sit and just let it kind of bind together more. So as you can see, that's happening over here. And like if I were going to throw this into the waffle griddle, I would definitely wait at least 10 minutes and let it get nice and bound together. So now we are going to exercise patience. As far as serving your pancakes, a little bit of pure maple syrup is always a hit. Definitely get the kind that is pure maple syrup and not the kind that you find at the grocery store where when you look at the ingredients, it's made with corn syrup. So you're not actually getting, syrup from a maple tree. You're drinking or you're doctoring up your pancake with corn syrup. So we definitely want to get away from that. And there are minerals and there are nutrients in maple syrup. Yes, it is very high in wholesome sugars. So for those of us who are watching our weight or watching our sugar levels, use it sparingly. But it is a great thing to just, doctor up your pancake with. And then I love to put some toasted pecans on any breakfast food that I make that's, delicious like this. I'll toast some pecans in a dry skillet and chop them up and then just sprinkle them on because I think just the flavor is so buttery and it really adds a dimension. And of course, adds more fiber, adds more protein and healthy fats. So if you can see our batter here, the look of it changed. You can see that it almost looks like it's set. And so this is how we knew that it was time to flip it. And it's always good to have a successful pancake flip when you're cooking live because you never know. And so here we go. So we have our 3 awesome looking pumpkin pancakes that literally were made from a real pumpkin. And I'm excited. So we are going to get a plate out here so we can plate these. So I'm going to eat some. Let's see, I got a plate around here. Yes, we have a plate. Now, the second side always cooks way quicker than the first side. So you don't have the same amount of time to wait around. And we also don't have the indicator because, it's already cooked on the top. So there's nothing to visually show us that it's done cooking. We just have to kind of be tuned in and realize, you're only going to need to do 10 or 15 seconds on the second side. And we can also peek and it's not going to fall apart because, so you can see that was perfectly done. And we've got our pancakes here, nice and fluffy and delicious. And so I'm going to top mine with some of these pecans, which I have toasted. And like I said, to toast your pecans, you can just do it in a dry skillet. No need to add any oil or anything. Sprinkle them up there. Looks so yummy. I'm getting hungry here. A little bit of this syrup. Woo! Yum! And there you have it. This is our pumpkin pancake and or pumpkin waffle recipe. So for more great recipes like this, visit me at realhealthyrecipes.com, and I'll see you next time.